On Content Classroom this week, I want to share the biggest mistake I ever made when I started out on my repurposing and content journey. If I think right back to the beginning, when I first started to repurpose content, I was so over the moon that I was cutting out so much of my workload. Up till that point, I'd be doing everything by hand, manually, very painfully, didn't look great, wasn't fun to do. And although the results, the conversations that we were getting on the back of it were enough to justify carrying on doing it, I knew there needed to be a more efficient way of doing this. But once I'd figured out how to do it, I then fell into the opposite trap, which I think a lot of people go through. I think a lot of you will recognize yourself in this, or you'll be able to call it out as something that you're worried about as repurposing goes. And what that mistake was that I automated too much. I was putting stuff out there that hadn't been checked by hand, because the power of automation and AI and large language models and things meant that I could automate almost all that stuff. And I remember putting stuff out there, uploading bulk, copy and pasting things in, leaving it to run. And I remember getting 2 or 3 messages from the team to go, "What is this that you've posted out? It just doesn't make sense." And when I went back and looked at the post that had gone out, they're right. Like, it had nothing to do with the video that had gone out there. And that for me was a real, one, it was embarrassing. It was really embarrassing. But 2, what that taught me was that there needs to be the right amount of human over the top of any repurposing. So I always cringe when people tell me, oh, they're going to do their own repurposing and we're just going to use, one of the tools that are out there, V.io or Vidyard or whatever. They're great. They're certainly a lot better now than they ever have been and coming along in leaps and bounds. But my caveat to everyone out there is that don't make that mistake. Don't be tempted because you've come from a really hard place of, I have no content and I want to get stuff out there, to now I've got all this content. What do I do with it? I want to get it all out there. I've got no problem with people putting out a lot of content. I put out a lot of content intentionally just to prove it's possible. I can never run dry in the well of content. I don't even publish half the stuff that I create, right? That's fine. Don't have a problem with that. But you need to figure out what your level of human intervention is on all of these assets that you create. Do you check each clip, start and finish, to make sure that it's right? Do you remove filler words? Do you remove word gaps? Do you add studio sound and make it all sound amazing? Or does that work for every video? Because sometimes it can take out laughter and things like that, and you don't want to lose that. That's a really great human touch. When you're asking your AI model to produce copy as a base, and it needs to be a base part for your LinkedIn posts, right? You can kind of get away with it for a brand. So if you're producing a copy for a business page, you might be able to get it to produce completely the right text from start. If you're doing it from a personal page, that needs much more thought and attention over the top of it. And then you've got things like, if you're asking ChatGPT to create 2 different versions, sometimes it doesn't get the personal version right and it still talks about you in the third person. And there's all these checks that need to go on over the top of whatever you're doing. So whilst it does remove a lot of the work from the top end of what you're doing with video repurposing, you need to test it bit by bit to find out what those little challenges are within it, so you can catch them all. Because whilst I'm not a big fan of perfect, it needs to be good enough. And you need to avoid getting caught in that trap of pumping out content without thought. And the longer I do this, the more value I see in content done well. It's been great to do stuff at scale and experiment with things. But actually where I see the biggest results are the stuff that I've spent even more time on. So again, it kind of comes back down to, rather than just saving you all of these hours of doing work, actually what it means is you can spend fewer hours doing better content. And never ever remove that layer of human over the top, because that's where it's at. That's the real difference between you and the competition who would just not paying enough attention. And I learned that the hard way. It was really embarrassing, but hopefully now that you've heard that story, you can understand the difference. And, I went into that with best of intentions. It's not like I went in to try and con people or, get more money out of people for less. Like, I wasn't even getting paid for this at this point. I was just doing it for more the business I was working for. It was absolutely about trying to do the right thing for the business. but it went too far. And I had to rein it back a bit and make sure I stayed over the top of things. So I hope that some people are out there, like, give you that heads up now so that you don't have to make that same mistake yourself. Keep an eye out for it. And when you find it, stamp on it and make sure you stay at that level. Don't let AI cross that boundary into being too automated, that it affects the outward view of who you are, because that's very hard to create. It's very hard to fix if you get seen as the wrong way. And it's very hard to get feedback on, because most people who see that content where it's just blah because it's been produced by AI, they don't want to know. They're not going to feed you back and tell you. Very rarely will they tell you. So keep an eye on that. And that's a lesson painfully learned that I got early on.